I learned this from Bill Isaacs in a dialogue context, and I've adapted it to scribing. And I've also tried to weave in system thinking, which is something that I've been incorporating into my drawing as well. It's a facilitative approach. Initially, I learned it around verbal communication, but when we think about it applied to visuals, it takes on a different meaning. So there are basically 4 choices that we can make. When we hear something, we can choose to bypass it, where we say, I'm hearing this, but I don't want to engage with it. I just want to put it on the side for now. And we just let it go. And then another one is naming something, where we hear it and we think, I want to include this, but I'm not sure how. So we hold it in our heads and we note that we bring it into our attention. We don't do anything yet. So it's just inside. Then there's engaging, which is where we have named something and we decide that we want to expand on it. And this is where we might choose to draw. In some ways, the bypass and the naming is not at all seen. That might not be up on a wall or in the picture. And sometimes with naming, I might write something on a Post-it note or write something small on the side of a wall in pencil, but I haven't really put it into the big picture yet. Then when we get to engage, it's the decision around, yes, this needs to be here. And it might still be small. It might be a word or one picture, but it's something that we've already decided to include. Then when we get to transform, there's something in between engage and transform where, depending on how much we choose to engage, we can engage something and we can draw something really big, or we can engage something and draw it really small. And that then leads to how we transform or shift the dynamic in the field, in the room, even in ourselves, in where we're paying attention. And to weave in the systems thinking part, the attenuating is when we want to try to minimize attention or bring it down. And that might be to balance something out. For example, sometimes in a dialogue, there's one person talking a lot, and they might be going on and on about something, and there might be 12 other people in the circle, but one person is really dominating it. And so as a scribe, we have a choice of how much to write, how much to represent from that one person. We can be listening and listening and listening, and we can be naming some things that are important, and we can be bypassing some things that we know we need to let go of. And maybe we don't engage with very much yet because we're waiting for other voices in the conversation to come in. Even in a 30-minute dialogue, if one person has spoken 15 minutes, we might attenuate the dynamic by only writing one sentence of what that person has said. And it can be challenging because it requires a lot of synthesis to boil that down, but it ends up balancing and creating space for other people's expressions to come up on the wall as well. Then another thing that we can do in making these choices of discernment is to amplify. This would be where we want to reinforce something, so it would be a reinforcing dynamic. And if we want to amplify, an example could be where in the same dialogue of 12 people, one person has been speaking for 15 minutes, and maybe 4 other people talk for another 10 minutes, and one person talks in 20 seconds of that whole 30-minute dialogue. But because we're attuned to hearing the different voices, we can choose to engage that one voice that came in very quickly and in a small window of time, and therefore we transform the dynamic by helping to amplify the small voice and attenuate the larger voice. And so it balances out the dynamic. In writing about this, I used to think, and I think this still applies, that bypassing is more when you're tracking with the flow of the conversation. So it's probably more, you're just trying to join it, really. You're just trying to get in and be part of the flow of meaning. To name something is probably more listening level 1 or 2, where we might write a word or draw a picture, and it's more literal. To engage something is probably more when we start to listen from level 3, where we're joining in a deeper level from the perspective of the room and the speakers. So we start to shift from being outside the dynamic and objective to it, and actually entering the dynamic and drawing from within. We are engaged differently, and we're also engaging the content differently. And then to transform is to make moves to influence the containers. This is where our work as graphic facilitators or visual practitioners helps to build the container. And this is very invisible work, but by going back to the example I had, if there is a balance of power in the room that is keeping a system at ego awareness level, if we're operating from an ecosystem awareness, we can start leveling out the dynamic. This is where we can come in and start to make a shift in the container itself by what we're representing. I find this very useful because I can remember it's a, bypass, name, engage, transform. It's 4 stages. I don't think about it anymore when I'm scribing, but it's very helpful if I feel like if I have a pressure to draw too much, I know it's okay to let things go. We can use the language of let go, let come also. So let go would be bypass. And then let come might be more around engage and transform.